Welcome to episode 6. Our topic in today's seminar is going to be Caesar and the Jews, which is chapter 5 in your class notes. I should say at the beginning, we have had a massive ice storm here in the state of Oklahoma. We have been without power across the state with over 250,000 homes without electricity. I know we've had a hurricane hit the southern coast of New Orleans and going through that part of the country and the East Coast, and we've got many hundreds of thousands without power there. So it's been a terrific weather week here in the United States. We still have many people here locally that do not have power yet. That's why we were not able to have class on Monday, and now we are on Friday, and God willing, we will be back on schedule next Monday and continue from there. Let me do just a little bit more housekeeping as we begin. First of all, we are coming to the close or the end of the material that you already have. I believe you may have material for one more lesson. And I can tell you that one more lesson was prepared when we began, and it has been modified since then. But you could be able to at least start with that as we start. However, I don't know who is still with us that began, but for those of you here locally and got a hard copy, if you will send me an email. And again, the email is Ezra, E-Z-R-A, at St. Elijah, that's STElijahokc.com, and let me know you want the next set of printed material, and hopefully by Monday I can have that printed off and available for you by name, and you can pick it up as before. For those of you that are watching on the internet, online, if you are continuing with us and would like the material to accompany the next set of our classes together, I would ask you to, again, email me, or if you never have and wish to, email me at the same email address, Ezra@StElijahokc.com, and we will send you a free PDF of the next set of material, Part 2, the historical in the Apocalypse. Section 1 will be the letters to the 7 churches. So beginning next Monday in our next session, which would be episode number 7, we will again take up the book of Revelation, the Apocalypse, and begin looking at chapters 2 and 3 and the letters to the 7 chapters. So I invite you to get your printed material by sending me an email and requesting, if you're local, a hard copy, or if you're local and wish a PDF copy, you're welcome to do that. Just specify whether you want the hard copy and we'll pick it up, or that you would like the PDF file, and we will be able to send that as a reply, as an attachment to you personally. So that will kind of get us up to speed on housekeeping. So let us begin now with episode 6, chapter 5, Caesar and the Jews. We have been approaching and getting closer to the time of the first century, the birth of Christ, and the writing of the Gospels, and especially the Gospel of John and the Apocalypse of John, written at the beginning of the 9th decade, somewhere 90 to perhaps 95, 96 AD. So let us begin. At the end of the first century AD, the identity of a Jew was no longer a biological or ethnic issue. Inside Judaism, one's belief in the identity of the Messiah, in particular, if you said that identity was Jesus as the Messiah Christ, that would now define you as a true Jew inside Judaism. Because a true Jew did not believe Jesus was the Messiah after a certain point in Jewish history. However, the issue of who was a true Jew was not simply a theological dispute within Judaism. This is lost to us. We just think there's Judaism and Christianity. It was the imperial policies of Rome, the policies of the emperor, that turned the true identity of a Jew into a matter of life and death. Caesar's horizontal thumb decided who was a true Jew. It was a decision made by Caesar. So let us now discover how this came to be. Let us discover how it is that Roman imperial policy now defines who is a true, real Jew. We began in 63 BC, 63 years before the Christian era would begin, with Roman commander Pompey and Herod the Great's father Antipater. When Herod the Great, the major king of the Jews at the time of the birth of Christ and the building of the great temple, when Herod the Great was 10 years old, the Roman general Pompey invaded Palestine. Herod's father, Antipater, became an ally, and the association between the Herods, the Herodians, and Rome began. The Jewish historian Josephus records the relationship of Julius Caesar, Mark Antony, and Octavian Caesar Augustus in his account, The Antiquities of the Jews, as the following citations from Josephus will show us. In 47 BC, the relationship of Julius Caesar and Antipater. In 47 BC, Julius Caesar appointed Antipater the procurator of Judea. In other words, Judea is going to become a client state with its own ruler who rules on behalf of the Romans. And it is up to that ruler to keep his people in line and not cause any trouble to bother Rome with. Josephus says, however, when Caesar after some time, had finished the war and sailed away for Syria, he honored Antipater, that's Herod's father. He honored him greatly and confirmed Hyrcanus as the high priest, and bestowed on Antipater the privilege of being a citizen of Rome and a freedom from taxes everywhere. When Antipater had made this speech, Caesar appointed Hyrcanus to be high priest and gave Antipater whatever principality he himself would choose, leaving the determination to himself, So he, Antipater, made the choice of procurator of Judea, and Caesar made him the procurator of Judea. Antipater then named two of his sons, Phasaelus and Herod, as governors in Judea. Now, when Caesar had settled the affairs of Syria, again I'm quoting Josephus, he sailed away, and as soon as Antipater had conducted Caesar out of Syria, Antipater returned to Judea, and seeing that Hyrcanus was of slow and slothful temper, he made Phasaelus, I don't know how to pronounce the name, his eldest son to be the governor of Jerusalem and of the places that were about it, but now committed Galilee to Herod, his next son, who was then a very young man, for he was about 25 years of age. So Antipater had two sons, and given the opportunity, he made one son the ruler over the southern area that included Jerusalem, and he made the other son, Herod, over the northern region around the Sea of Galilee. In 41 BC, Mark Antony will begin a relationship with Herod. In 41 BC, Mark Antony made Herod and Phasaelus tetrarchs. When after this Antony, quoting Josephus, came into Syria, Cleopatra, we've all heard the story of Mark Antony and Cleopatra. What we've never heard is their relationship with King Herod and the relationship of the Herods with all this Roman history that is known to us, but without knowing the role the Herods played with it and in it. Cleopatra met Antony in Cilicia and brought him to fall in love with her, and there came now also 100 of the most potent of the Jews to accuse Herod and those about him, and set the men of the greatest eloquence among them to speak. There's a group that wants to overthrow Herod now that there's a change in rulership, now that Caesar is dead. But Messala contradicted them, and on behalf of the young men, and all this in the presence of Hyrcanus, who was Herod's father-in-law already. When Mark Antony, had heard both sides at Daphne, he asked Hyrcanus who they were that governed this nation the best. He replied, Herod and his friends. Hereupon Antony, by reason of the hospitable friendship he had made with Herod's father, Antipater, he made both Herod and Phasaelus tetrarchs and committed the public affairs of the Jews to them. Now we're getting even closer to the first century. We're at 37 BC, and the Roman Senate is going to now declare Herod the king of the Jews. Now, not a tetrarch, not a small ruler, but the actual title of king. Julius Caesar had been assassinated in 44 BC. Three of Caesar's generals, Lepidus, Octavian, and Antony, avenged Caesar's assassination and will now rule the Roman Empire as the second triumvirate. Again, quoting Josephus, the Parthians invaded Palestine from the east in 40 BC. Phasaelus was killed, Hyrcanus taken captive, and Herod escaped through Egypt and made his way to Rome and Mark Antony. Under Antony's guidance, the Roman Senate declared Herod the king of Judea, in 37 BC. Now this is significant. You see, it is Rome that declared who the king of the Jews is. In the Old Testament, it had been God. The prophet Samuel anointing the kings and the lineage then, and you established first Saul and then David and then the Davidic covenant for those that accepted the Davidic covenant. The northern tribes didn't. But that David or one of his descendants would be on the throne. But here we are in 37 BC, and God has nothing to do with it officially. It is the Roman Senate that now declares Herod to be the king of Judea. And so this relationship between Judea and Rome, and now the Roman Senate, gets tighter and tighter and tighter. The triumvirate divided the empire, with Antony ruling over the eastern provinces, Egypt, Judea, and so forth, and Octavian ruled over Rome and the western provinces. Josephus recounts the governing by Antony and Cleopatra jointly of the Eastern prophecies in his book, The Antiquities of the Jews, in book 15, chapters 1 and 5. Then in 30 BC, there will be a tug of war between Mark Antony and Octavian over becoming the single ruler of the Roman Empire. In the 7th year of Herod's reign as king, civil war broke out between Antony and Octavian. According to Josephus, at this time it was that the battle happened at Actium between Octavius Caesar and Antony in the 7th year of the reign of Herod. Herod, because of his long association with Antony, backed Antony in this war against Octavian. But Octavian won. A defeated Antony returned to Egypt and committed suicide with Cleopatra. Now this puts Herod in a pickle. He supported the wrong guy. Josephus says Herod's other affairs were now very prosperous, and he was not to be easily assaulted on any side. Yet there did come upon him a danger that would hazard his entire dominion. After Antony had been beaten at the Battle of Actium by Caesar Augustus, for at that time both Herod's enemies and his friends despaired of his affairs, for it was not probable, not likely, that he would remain without punishment from the victorious Octavian, who had shown, because Herod had shown so much friendship toward Antony. Now Herod immediately, after learning of Antony's defeat and his suicide, Herod immediately sought out Octavian, this winner, and he confessed to him his long-standing friendship and service to Antony. He confessed his dealings with Antony had always been open, honest, and without deceit. He also confessed that none of his soldiers had fought with Antony against Octavian. Herod then pledged the same kind of loyalty and friendship without deceit to Octavian. Octavian was impressed by Herod's frankness and restored him his diadem, the crown, and encouraged him to exhibit himself as a great friend to himself, as he had been to Anthony, and then he held him in great esteem. Herod remains king, and in 20 BC, 20 years before the coming of the Christian era, Herod begins rebuilding the temple in Jerusalem. When the returnees had returned from Babylon in 516 BC, under the leadership of Zerubbabel, began rebuilding the temple that had been destroyed. It was a smaller temple than before. Under the leadership then of Ezra, the prophet, Nehemiah, Zerubbabel, they began to rebuild the national life of those that return. Herod is now going to take on the project of enlarging the temple itself. The temple had been built on the Temple Mount, Mount Moriah. The story is told in the Old Testament. And if this was the Temple Mount and the temple was here, it could only be so big because of the little top wasn't big enough. So Herod will begin the engineering project of building a wall here, a foundation wall, to fill in with dirt. Like so, he will enlarge the Temple Mount so that a larger structure, temple, could be built. By the way, when the Romans will destroy the Second Temple in 70 AD, the structure of the temple itself will be totally destroyed. There'll be no stone left upon another stone, but the walls will be left. And everyone has heard about the Wailing Wall in Jerusalem. Well, that's the wall that Herod built to enlarge the top of the Temple Mount to hold a much larger structure. Josephus says it this way: "And now Herod, in the 18th year of his reign as king, and after the acts already mentioned, undertook a very great work, that is, to build of himself the temple of God, make it larger in compass, and to raise it to a most magnificent altitude, as esteeming it to be the most glorious of all his actions, as it really was, to bring it to perfection, and this would be sufficient for an everlasting memorial of him." By the way, this is the temple that when Jesus says in the Gospel of John, "You tear down this temple and I will rebuild it in 3 days," referring, of course, to his body in the resurrection. And they laughed at him because at that point, if that was in 30 AD, the building had been going on since 20 BC for 50 years or so, and it wasn't completed. In fact, it's not going to be completed, if memory serves, till like 66 AD, another 36 years or so after Christ, and it will only be a finished product in for about 4 years before the Romans are going to completely destroy it in 70 AD. Too much info, I know. So, Herod restarts rebuilding this massive building project, rebuilding the temple. In 14 BC, we're really getting close to our first century, Caesar Augustus, who was Octavian, takes the name now Caesar Augustus, is now the emperor, in ruling the Roman Empire, and his relationship with something called the Jewish tax. In 14 BC, Caesar Augustus wrote a letter to the citizens of Cyrene forbidding the mistreatment of Jews, including forbidding interference with the sending of sacred money by the Jews to Jerusalem for the support of Herod's new temple. Jews from all over the Roman Empire, including Mesopotamia, perhaps as far away as Persia, where Jews were living, began sending money to Jerusalem to help pay for the building of the temple, to pay for then the maintenance and upkeep, and for the priesthood and Levites and all those that now served in the duties of this new temple. Josephus says, Caesar Augustus, this is the letter that Augustus wrote and sent to Cyrene. Caesar Augustus, high priest and tribune of the people, ordains thus, since the nation of the Jews have been found grateful to the Roman people, not only at this time, but in times past also, and chiefly Hyrcanus the high priest, under my father Julius Caesar, the emperor, it seemed good to me and my counselors, according to the sentence and oath of the people of Rome, that the Jews have liberty to make their own customs according to the law of their forefathers, as they made use of them under Hyrcanus, the high priest of Almighty God, and that there the Jews' sacred money be not touched, but be sent to Jerusalem, and that it may be committed to the care of the receivers at Jerusalem, and that they be not obliged, the Jews in whatever city, to go before any judge on the Sabbath day, nor on the day of preparation to it after the 9th hour. You can't make a Jew carry on business on his holy day, the Sabbath, Saturday, beginning at 9 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, is it? 6 o'clock, whenever 9 o'clock would have been, on Friday evening before sunset. But if anyone is caught stealing the Jews' holy books or their sacred money, and whether it be out of the synagogue they steal it, or a public school, he shall be deemed a sacrilegious person, and his goods shall be brought into the public treasury of the Romans. An offender is going to be found guilty and have all of his property confiscated. The granting of religious freedom to the Jews by the Romans began during the reign of Julius Caesar, and it continued from 47 BC up till now, 14 AD, where the next Caesar, now building on that the policy of the emperor, continues the imperial policy. It is now Caesar Augustus affirming their religious freedom, including the collecting and sending of a temple tax, their sacred money to Jerusalem for the support of the temple. There will be an edict by Caesar Augustus that also authorized the collection of the Jews to collect the temple tax all the way across the Roman Empire and sent to the temple. Okay, we're building the relationship of how the Jews' national life, not just in Judea, but their national identity, if you will, as an ethnic nation scattered throughout the Roman Empire, how that Jewish identity and freedom is being established and honored by the emperors. We come now to 41 AD. This is in the first century. We are talking 41 AD. This will be after the death, crucifixion, resurrection of Jesus Christ in 30 AD. Claudius is now the Roman emperor. 41 AD, Claudius became the emperor of Rome and ruled from 41 to 54 AD. These were crucial years in defining the relationship between imperial Rome and the synagogue, and in defining the relationship in Judaism between the synagogue and the church. You got it? Rome and the Jews, and inside Judaism, the synagogue and the church. In 41 AD, a riot broke out between Greeks and Jews living in Alexandria in Egypt. Both groups sent ambassadors to Rome to appeal to Claudius. In response, Claudius wrote a letter to the city of Alexandria that contained his response to a variety of gifts and offers that was made by the Alexandrians, obviously seeking to gain imperial favor, all of which the gifts Claudius accepted, except for the offer by the Alexandrians to create an imperial cult with a high priest for him. The reason for his refusal was being the Roman sensibilities, again, quoting Josephus from the letter that the emperor wrote to Alexandria. But this is Claudius speaking, I deprecate the appointment of a high priest to me and the building of temples, for I do not wish to be offensive to my contemporaries. And my opinion is that temples and such forms of honor have by all ages been granted as a prerogative to the gods alone. We've already dealt with the creation of emperor worship under Caesar Augustus, and that was done in the eastern end of the Roman Empire because the Romans and their sensibilities did not at first embrace the idea of worshiping a living emperor. So Claudius is bearing evidence of that sensibility existing in Rome, while at the same time providing us evidence that the worship of the emperor, the living emperor, was being carried out on the eastern end of the Roman Empire, in Egypt, in Palestine, in Turkey, in the Turkey where the 7 churches of Asia are that we're about to get to next week. His decree that he gave at this point also included the following passage regarding the Jews. Again, quoting the decree from Josephus, as for the question, which party was responsible for the riots and feud, or rather, if truth be told, the war between the Jews, although in confrontation with their opponents, your ambassadors, and particularly Dionysius, the son of Theon, contended with great zeal. By the way, your ambassadors made a very good case for you. Nevertheless, I was unwilling to make a strict inquiry, though guarding within me a store, notice this, a store of immutable indignation against whichever party renews the conflict. I'm not really going to investigate which one of you groups started it, but let me tell you, I will have immutable indignation if any one of you starts it up again. And I tell you once and for all that unless you put a stop to this ruinous and obstinate enmity against each other, I shall be driven to show what a benevolent prince can be when turned to righteous indignation. Don't make me have to deal with you. Wherefore, once again, I conjure you that on one hand, the Alexandrians show themselves forbearing and kindly towards the Jews, who for many years have dwelt in the same city, and dishonor none. You Alexandrians, do not dishonor their rites observed by them in the worship of their God, but allow them to observe their customs as in the time of the deified Augustus, which customs I also, after hearing both sides, have sanctioned. And on the other hand, I explicitly order the Jews not to agitate for more privileges than they formerly possessed, and not in the future to send out a separate embassy as though they lived in a separate city, a thing unprecedented, and not to force their way into gymnasiarchic games at the gym, where the Olympic Games were held, the stadiums, or cosmetic games, while enjoying their own privileges and sharing a great abundance of advantages in a city not their own. And not to bring in, he's talking to the Jews, not to bring in or admit Jews who come down the river from Egypt or from Syria, a proceeding which will compel me to conceive serious suspicions. Otherwise, I will by all means take vengeance on them as fomenters, of which is a general plague infecting the whole world. In other words, I'm going to respond to you Jews, not just in Alexandria, but treat all of the Jews as what a plague infecting the whole empire. If desisting from these courses, you consent to live with mutual forbearance and kindliness, I on my side will exercise a solicitude of very long standing for the city, as one which is bound to us by traditional friendship. Wow. Rome is controlling the behavior of Jews and Jewish freedom, telling them not to take it for granted, and they cannot begin to do other things to enlarge the freedom already given to them. Claudius affirmed the religious freedom of the Jews, but made this freedom contingent upon not creating a separate Jewish city within the city of Alexandria, and to not enlarge the Jewish population in Alexandria by importing Jews in Egypt from up the river or from Syria, Palestine. Implied was the mutual separation of Jews and non-Jews. That is the restriction against making converts to Judaism. That was just taken for granted, that separation. The exclusion of Jews and non-Jews being understood at this time. The Jews could not increase their percentage of the population by an influx of Jews from other regions or by making converts. They could not enlarge themselves except by their birth rate. According to Josephus, in response to the riots in Alexandria, in addition to the letter to Alexandria cited above, we just looked at it, Claudius also sent an edict at the request of King Agrippa and King Herod, both to Alexandria and to Syria, whose contents are as follows. So here is a second letter, a decree by Claudius to a different city being sent to Alexandria, whose contents are, Tiberius Claudius Caesar Augustus Germanicus, the full title, High Priest and Tribune of the people, ordains that since I am assured that the Jews of Alexandria, called Alexandrians, have been joint inhabitants in the earliest times with the Alexandrians, and have obtained from their kings equal privileges with them, as is evident by the public records that are in their possession, and the edicts themselves, and that after Alexandria had been subjected to our empire by Augustus, their rights and privileges, the Jews' rights and privileges, have been preserved by those presidents who have at divers times been sent thither, and that no dispute has been raised about those rights and privileges that Augustus willingly gave, that all men should be so subject, first of all, to the Romans, as to continue in the observation of their own customs, and not be forced to transgress the ancient rules of their own country's religion. But recently, in the time of Caius, the Alexandrians became insolent towards the Jews that were among them, which Caius, out of his great madness and want of understanding, reduced the nation of the Jews very low, because they would not transgress the religious worship of their country, and call him, Caius, a god. I will, therefore, that the nation of the Jews be not deprived of their rights and privileges on account of the madness of Caius, but that those rights and privileges which they formerly enjoyed be preserved to them, and that they may continue in their own customs. And I charge both parties to take very great care that no troubles may arise after the promulgation of this edict. The edict is being sent in behalf of the Jewish nation. The word nation doesn't mean a country like we would use it today. Nation is the Greek word ethnicity, and so it's the Jewish people. Wherever the Jews are inside the Roman Empire, that's the Jewish nation. We're used to using that word nation the same way. For example, people that are fans of a certain college football program would be part of the Cowboy Nation or the Sooner Nation or the whatever nation you call the group that you happen to support, part of a nation, which doesn't mean there's an actual territory other than a central location where the team is located. So there was a central location of Judea, but the people, or the Jewish people, are scattered everywhere. Again, according to Josephus, based on his action in Alexandria on behalf of the Jews and his written edict to the Jews in Syria and Judea, where he sent the one we just read, Claudius then is now going to issue an empire-wide edict. It said, "And such were the contents of this edict on behalf of the Jews that was sent to Alexandria, but the edict that was sent into other parts of the inhabitable earth was this which follows. Tiberius Claudius Caesar Augustus Germanicus, high priest, tribune of the people, chosen consul the second time, ordains this: upon the petition of King Agrippa and King Herod, who are persons very dear to me, that I would grant the same rights and privileges should be preserved to the Jews, which are in all the Roman Empire, which I have granted to those of Alexandria. I very willingly comply therewith, and this grant I make not only for the sake of the petitioners, Herod and Agrippa, but as judging those Jews for whom I have been petitioned worthy of such a favor on account, notice, on account of their fidelity and friendship to the Romans, their faithfulness to the Romans. I think it also very just that no Grecian, no Greek city, not just in the land of Greece, the Greek islands, Turkey, the whole western edge was Greek, that no Grecian city should be deprived of such rights and privileges. You got Jews scattered in Turkey, this applies to them, since they were preserved these rights to them under the great Augustus. It will therefore be fit to permit the Jews who are in all the world under us to keep their ancient customs without being hindered so to do, and I do charge them also to use this, my kindness, to them with moderation, and not to show a contempt of the superstitious observances of other nations, other ethnicities, but to keep their own laws only. And I will that this decree of mine be engraven on tablets by the magistrates of the cities and colonies and municipal places, both those within Italy and those without it, both kings and governors, by the means of the ambassadors, and to have them exposed, made visible to the public for a full 30 days in such a place whence it may plainly be read from the ground. Now Claudius also issued this empire-wide edict concerning the Jews based on a prior edict by Caesar Augustus. He says what the great Augustus did. It will therefore, Josephus quoting him, it will therefore be fit to permit the Jews who are in the entire world under us to keep their ancient customs without being hindered to do so. And I do charge them also to use this my kindness with moderation, and not to show contempt of the superstitious, what the Jews would call superstitious observance of others. Claudius made Jewish freedom freedom of religion throughout the Roman Empire conditional. They could not create cities within cities in the Roman Empire. They could not migrate to a few cities and become a majority there. They could not protest public games and other activities sanctioned by Rome. They could not denigrate any other religion that was legally recognized within the empire. In other words, they could not use their freedom to practice their religion as a freedom to replace, supplant, or make converts from other religions within the empire. They could not proselytize. The Jews knew the threat of the Roman power was no idle threat. Claudius reigned from 41 to 54 AD. During his reign, he made good his threat for the Jews to live peacefully within the Roman Empire. He threatened them, "Don't take my kindness for granted." According to Roman historian Suetonius, since the Jews were continually making disturbances at the instigation of Chrestus, Emperor Claudius expelled them from Rome. Mention was made of this expulsion of the Jews from Rome in the book of Acts in the Christian New Testament. Quote, "A certain Jew named Aquila, a native of Pontus, having recently come from Italy with his wife Priscilla, because Claudius had commanded all the Jews to leave Rome." I want you to see, those of you who have said, "What's all this history about?" that the history we're talking about intersects with the daily lives of Jews and Christians in the first century. It is this history, this living cultural identity within which they are living and having to make decisions, not only theologically, religiously, between whether or not the synagogue or the church is the true Israel, but they're having to deal with the larger non-Jewish population as well. You see, in what we just read, the point is not whether Christus refers to Christus, Christ. The point is the expelling from Rome of the Jews for not living peacefully within the Roman Empire. That would have happened sometime before 54 AD. That's 40 years before the time of John writing his gospel and the apocalypse. That's how close we are. The message was patently clear to the Jewish people. Act within the boundaries of behavior acceptable to Rome, or you will forfeit your homes, your livelihood, and perhaps your life. The policies of Rome toward the Jews directly shaped the Jewish policies toward Christian Jews and then Gentile Christians. If you can't make converts and you've got a Jewish Messianic sect doing exactly that through the activities of the Apostle Paul, Silas, Barnabas, etc., it's obvious there's going to be a problem with Rome, And if there's a problem with Rome, there's going to be a problem between Rome and the synagogue, the Jews. Included in their permission to keep their ancient customs was the Jewish right to levy their temple tax and send this money to Jerusalem, remember? However, the religious freedom of the Jews was also now contingent upon not showing contempt of the superstitious observances of other ethnicities, but to keep their own laws only. Don't make converts. Something happens then in 70 AD. Festering Jewish nationalism erupted in 66 AD. I tell you what, why don't we just stop at this moment? It's about a good stopping point for us. Let's just take a break. We'll come back in a few minutes and finish up today's topic together. Thanks. Okay, welcome back. We were just beginning to discuss 70 AD and what's going to propel or trigger the next movement of imperial policy towards the Jews. Festering Jewish nationalism, coming out of the Messianic apocalypticism we've already looked at, erupted in 66 AD. The First Jewish-Roman War broke out as a general revolt against paying Roman taxes. Rome won the war in 70 AD and destroyed the Jewish temple in Jerusalem. After the destruction of the Jewish temple, Roman Emperor Vespasian converted the Jewish temple tax. Remember that it had been sent by all males in the empire to the Jewish temple in Jerusalem. He converted it into the fiscus Judaicus, the Jewish tax. Before 70 AD, all male Jews between the ages of 20 and 50 paid an annual tax of half a shekel. That was equivalent of 2 Roman denarii, or 2 Attic drachmae, Greek money, to the temple in Jerusalem. With the Jewish temple destroyed, there's no reason for the temple tax to be given, but now Vespasian, using funds previously sent to Jerusalem, the temple tax became the fiscus Judaicus, with the funds diverted to Rome for the rebuilding of the temple of Jupiter Capitolinus that had burnt down in 69 AD. He, Vespasian, also laid a tribute upon the Jews wheresoever they were, and enjoined on every one of them to bring 2 drachmae every year into the capital, as they used to pay the same to the temple at Jerusalem. Citing again Josephus. Vespasian confiscated the idea and the practice of the Jewish temple tax. The tax would still be collected in all the synagogues across the Roman Empire, but absent a temple in Jerusalem, the temple tax would now be sent to finance a temple in Rome, a pagan temple in Rome. The creation of the fiscus Judaicus changed 3 things. First, enjoined on every one of them could now include women and children among the Jews. and thus would enlarge the number of people required to pay the tax. Remember, the emperor needed money. The government needs money. You raise taxes to get the money. Secondly, Jewish taxes now financed pagan temples. Thirdly, the membership rolls of every synagogue now served as governmental tax rolls for the paying of the Jewish tax to Rome. Now we're at 80 AD. Domitian became the emperor of Rome and ruled until 96 AD. Became emperor in 80, will rule for 16 years. The 16 years in which the Gospel of John will be written and the Apocalypse will be written. The Gospel of John and Apocalypse were written. In the need of funds, Emperor Domitian issued the Domitian Edict in 85 AD. In this edict, he initiated harsh financial policies, including a harsh enforcement of the Fiscus Judaicus, the Jewish tax, on non-Jews living as Jews. We'll look at that in just a moment. And Jewish tax evaders. Two groups. The Roman historian Suetonius wrote, reduced to financial straits by the cost of his buildings and shows, as well as by the additions which he had made to the pay of the soldiers. He gave the army a pay raise. He tried to lighten the military expenses by then diminishing the number of his troops. But perceiving that in this way he exposed himself to the attacks of the barbarians if you shrink your forces, nevertheless, he had difficulty in easing his financial burdens, so he had no hesitation in resorting to every sort of robbery. This is the Roman historian speaking. The property of the living and the dead was seized everywhere on any charge brought by an accuser. It was enough to allege any action or word derogatory to the majesty of the prince, the ruler. Estates of those in no way connected to the emperor were confiscated. If but one man came forward to declare that he had heard from the deceased during their lifetime, the deceased's lifetime, that Caesar was his heir, besides other taxes, that on the Jews were levied with the utmost rigor, and those were, in addition to confiscating land, he now is going to deal rigorously with the Jews that are persecuted on two fronts, who without publicly acknowledged their faith, yet lived as Jews. Those who are not Jews living as if they are Jews. Publicly acknowledging your faith as a Jew is a way of saying being circumcised. A Jewish male was identifiable by having been circumcised. The Romans in particular, as well as almost all non-Jewish peoples, saw circumcision as a mutilation of a man. And they were radically opposed to it as some sort of barbaric custom of this weird group of people, the Jews. So anyone who was behaving like a Jew, going to the synagogue, beginning to worship only one God, but without publicly having been circumcised, were the ones we're talking about, as well as the second group, those who concealed their origin, concealed the fact that they had been circumcised, so they could not pay the Jewish tax on being a Jew. You got two groups in. He's going to nail. Those that are not circumcised Jews, we're going to get you. And those of you that are circumcised Jews that aren't paying your taxes, we're going to get you. Suetonius continues, I recall being present in my youth when the person of a man 90 years old was examined before the procurator. This would have been a public hearing, a public court. Before the procurator in a very crowded court to see whether or not he was circumcised. They stripped a 90-year-old man to make sure whether he had been circumcised or not publicly. Using the Fiscus Judaicus, Domitian persecuted two groups, those who led a Jewish life without publicly acknowledging this, without being circumcised, and those who concealed their origin, being circumcised, and did not pay the tribute levied upon them. This first group, those who look like a Jew, live like a Jew, but not publicly a Jew, not circumcised, included the God-fearers and Gentile converts to Christian Judaism. The second group was ethnic Jews who evaded paying the tax on Jews by no longer being practicing Jews. Domitian made the issue of Jewish identity a Roman issue. Non-Jews who acted like Jews, he punished because they were not ethnically circumcised Jews. Ethnic Jews who sought to evade paying the Fiscus Judaicus on the grounds they no longer were practicing Jews, he punished as Jewish tax evaders. For Imperial Rome, a Jew was a circumcised male. Imperial Rome imposed its definition of who was a Jew upon Judaism. As far as Rome was concerned, neither the synagogue nor the church had the authority to determine who was and was not a Jew. Only Rome could do that. Gentile converts to Christianity were not Jews according to Rome, and therefore were guilty. But because Rome considered the church to be a version of Judaism, all Gentiles in the church fell into the category of those who led a Jewish life without publicly acknowledging this. That is, being non-circumcised, Gentiles were not Jews, according to the Romans. And therefore, because you're not a Jew, a Christian Jew. You can't be a Christian Jew because you can't be a Jew without being circumcised. You can't be a Gentile Jew, that's contradictory. And you can't be a Christian. You can be a Christian Jew, but you can't be a Gentile Christian. You got it. Circumcised Christians, real Jews, according to Rome, were guilty of broken the Roman edicts forbidding the making of converts by Jews. Anyone accused of being in either category, I'm making converts of Gentiles, I'm guilty, or I am a Gentile without circumcision, was subject to punishment. You see, as for Rome, Christianity was a Jewish sect. You could not be a Gentile-Jew. You could not be a Gentile Christian, because a Christian is a Jew. Wow. Let's go to 93 AD, the time of the apocalypse being written. In 93 AD, Roman Emperor Domitian began the years of terror known as the Domitian Terror. He increased his harsh enforcement of the Fiscus Judaicus on those who led a Jewish life without publicly being circumcised, acknowledging this, and secondly, those who concealed their origin and did not pay the tribute levied upon them. This first category encompassed what the Romans saw as atheism. From the Roman point of view, the claim of worshiping only one deity amounted to atheism because it denied the validity of worship being given to other deities. The Jews were permitted this exclusivity provided they did not slander the worship of other deities nor seek to attract non-Jews to worship only one deity as well. The Roman historian Cassius Dio made it clear that Domitian targeted the first group on the grounds of atheism. He said, at the same year, Domitian slew, among the many others, Flavius Clemens, the consul, although he was a cousin, and had to wife Flavia Domitilla, who was also a relative of the emperor. The charge brought against them both was that of atheism, a charge on which many others who drifted into Jewish ways were condemned. Those who drifted, Gentiles who drifted into Christian Judaism, were condemned. Some of these were put to death, and the rest were at least deprived of their property. Because of his desperate need for revenue, for money, Domitian used informers to bring accusation against anyone suspected of being associated with the Fiscus Judaicus. The courts used two tests to establish guilt or innocence at this time. For those accused of atheism, that is, non-Jews living like Jews, the sacrifice test was used first. Those persons who were accused of being Christians but denied this accusation or claimed they ceased to be Christians in the past were subjected to a sacrifice test. They had to worship the image, the statue of the emperor at this time when this history was written, Trajan, and the statues of the gods, and had to curse Christ in order to prove they were loyal to the empire and did not reject polytheism and idolatry, including did not reject the imperial cult. That is, they had to prove they were no atheist in the Roman sense. For those accused of tax evasion, the test was simple. Whereas the original temple tax was imposed upon Jews themselves, It may have originally only been paid by active members of the synagogue in the various cities. The Romans now imposed this fiscus Judaicus and applied it ethnically to all Jews, whether active or not in the life of a synagogue. The accused was publicly examined, stripped in public, to determine whether he had been circumcised. If you're circumcised, you have to pay the Jewish tax, whether or not you consider yourself a Jew any longer, whether or not you even participate in the synagogue, or whether or not you observe any of the Jewish feast or Passover or whatever. As far as Rome was concerned, only an ethnic Jew who had been circumcised was a Jew. And a Jew was required to pay the fiscus Judaicus. Likewise for Rome, any non-Jew who embraced Jewish lifestyles, even a Jewish Messiah, Christ, or beliefs, was an atheist. The Roman distinction was clear. The crime of tax evasion applied to circumcised Jews. The crime of atheism applied to uncircumcised Gentile converts. Tax evasion was punishable by property confiscation. Atheism was punishable by property confiscation and execution. Once again, it was imperial Rome that defined who was and was not a Jew. Rome declared that only ethnic Jews that had been circumcised were Jews. Circumcised Jews were required to pay the fiscus Judaicus Jewish tax, whether they practiced it or not. Anyone else that practiced anything looking Jewish, Rome declared to be an atheist subject to death. Well, that brings us now to 93 AD, in the midst of the Domitian terror and the apocalypse. Over 1,927 years later, after the Domitian terror, we view John as a Christian and his Apocalypse as a Christian book. The Emperor Domitian saw John as a Jew, as did John himself. Paula Fredrickson's remarks regarding Paul apply as well equally to John. Paul held his convictions as a committed Jew, and he enacted them as a committed Jew. Paul lived his life entirely within his native Judaism. In other words, there was a time when Christianity was still Jewish. Inside Judaism, Jews did not convert so much as make a lateral move within Judaism, similar to a move being made from being a Sadducee to being a Pharisee, the same kind of move that Josephus had made. A Jew who became a Christian was a Jew becoming a Christian Jew, as opposed to maybe a Sadducee Jew. It was a lateral move inside Judaism. First century Judaism had many voices, including those rampant end-time expectations that included for some the apocalyptic prophetic fulfillment of the ingathering of Gentiles as Gentiles within Judaism. If you let the Gentiles in and circumcise them, you made them Jews. But if the Gentiles as Gentiles were to come into Judaism, and that itself was a symbol of being in the end times, then you see why keeping Gentiles as Gentiles to a Messianic sect became critical. There was a time, now invisible to us, when the apocalyptic expectation of a Messiah Christ and the inclusion of Gentiles as Gentiles within Judaism were legitimate variations inside Judaism. There was within Christian Judaism a pro-circumcision policy. Inside Judaism, inside the Christian group, there was a pro-circumcision policy. Christian Jews, known as Judaizers, because they wanted to make Jews out of Gentile converts by circumcising them. Most of the documents that Paul wrote have to deal with these issues of this issue over circumcision and these circumcising groups coming in wanting to make converts into Jews rather than letting them remain Gentiles. Against this idea, however, stood centuries of prophetic traditions. In the end, as Isaiah had foreseen, the Gentiles were to join with Israel, but they would not join Israel. Their place in the kingdom was to be as Gentiles, now free from their attachment to idol worship. Gentiles as Gentiles were part of Jewish end-time expectations. This expectation expressed in Isaiah is quoted by St. Paul in his letter to the Romans. There shall be a root of Jesse, and he who shall rise to reign over the Gentiles, in him the Gentiles shall hope. Gentile end-time inclusion did not mean an end-time conversion. A policy of circumcision, of turning these Gentiles into Jews, would undermine the very same positive sign of the times that they themselves, the Gentiles, embodied. However, first century Judaism never had the luxury of working out these eschatological expectations within itself. Roman imperial policy forced a definition of Judaism upon Judaism that excluded the possibility of the inclusion of Gentiles as Gentiles within Judaism. It was Rome that forced a division within Judaism between the many sects within Judaism and any Judaism that included a Gentile mission. You could be Jewish and part of any one of these sects, but you can't be part of that sect that is pro-Gentile as Gentile inclusion because Rome says so. We have to exclude you. After Domitian, Judaism developed into Jewish rabbinic Judaism. Christian Judaism, losing its Jewish members, developed into what became increasingly a non-circumcised Gentile Christianity. It was Rome that created the division between Judaism and Christian Judaism. It is no exaggeration to say that from the time Caesar Augustus founded the Roman Empire in 27 BC until Constantine became emperor in 306 AD, and then until the empire ended in 1453, that it was always imperial Rome that defined and enforced its definitions upon Judaism and Christian Judaism. The content of both Judaism and Christianity did not originate from Rome, but from the faith of ancient Israel and the resurrection of Jesus Christ. But it was imperial Rome that shaped the forming of that ancient faith into the rival sibling faith of the synagogue and the church. One gift that current Jewish scholars, such as Daniel Boyarin and Paula Fredrickson, a convert, by the way, to Judaism, one gift they have given us is to step outside the political identities imposed by Rome on both Judaism and Christianity, as they remind us, to use the title of a book by Christian author Edith Schaeffer, Christianity is Jewish. In confessing the love of this Orthodox Jew for Christianity, Boyarin goes on to say, I suggest that the affiliation between what we call Judaism and what we call Christianity is much more complex than most scholars, let alone most layfolk, imagine. The world that I have found in this research is one in which identities were much less sure than they have appeared to us until now, in which the very terms of identity were being worked on and worked out. Boyarin and Fredrickson both remind us of what first century AD Judaism, whether Christian Judaism or Rabbinic Judaism, looked like. They have, in fact, taken us back to a time before either Rabbinic Judaism or Christianity, as defined by Rome, before Christianity and Judaism existed, to the time which gave birth to both Rabbinic Judaism and Gentile Christianity. We easily lose sight of this fact. Our historical perspective obscures it. We look backward through the haze. But while history is always done backward, life is lived only forward, one day at a time. From our perspective in the 21st century, when New Testament texts are read as antagonistic to Jews and Judaism, due again to the long shadow of later Christian anti-Judaism cast backward, we simply assume that Judaism and Christianity are two incompatible traditions, because that is the way that, in large part, things eventually worked out. First century Judaism, in all its flavors, including Christian Judaism, lived and breathed the imminent eschatological end of time. I should say maybe lived and breathed the air of eschatological end of time. Let us not read backwards, Christianity is not only Jewish. From our perspective as Christians, Christianity is the true continuation of the ancient Israelite faith that began with Abraham. Therefore, all the apostles, Paul and John among them, believed they lived and worked in history's final hour, and this belief is absolutely foundational, shaping everything else they said and did. Let us not read history backwards but forwards. We began a few weeks ago in this study with the Babylonian Empire and the destruction of Jerusalem in 586 BC by the Babylonians. Following the book of Daniel, we have progressed forward through history to Persia and the return of the Jews to Jerusalem in 516, then to Alexander, the conquering of the Persian Empire, and the division of his empire in 323, to the time of the Seleucids, and the sacrificing of pigs on the temple altar in Jerusalem. The Romans have now come, and we have arrived at the 1st century AD. It is 94 AD in the Roman Empire. Domitian is the emperor. John begins to write his apocalypse. As we are able, as first century believers whose lives are at stake in believing that Jesus of Nazareth is the Messiah Christ and Son of God, let us now begin to read the words of the apocalypse. Wow. Well, beginning next week, we will begin with the letters to the 7 churches of the apocalypse, the 7 churches of Asia that were overseen by the Apostle John. Again, let me remind you that if you're wanting to follow along with the manual that's got the footnotes and the quotations and all of the citations as well as the illustrations that will be coming, please send me an email to ezra@stelijahokc.com and request a PDF file of the next portion of the manual. And if you are local, please send me an email telling me that you would like a hard copy, and we will begin getting those printed here that you may come personally and pick it up as the church. Well, God bless you. If you're dealing with the storm, we pray for a quick recovery for you, God's protection from all of us in the midst of the COVID pandemic. God willing, we'll see each other for our next class, which we hope to tape next Monday. Thank you, and we'll see you next session. Goodbye.